What if I told you that the Vatican has secret documents that reveal dark details about the apocalypse, and that they never want you to know? Forbidden texts, hidden manuscripts, apocalyptic prophecies under lock and key inside the Vatican's secret library. But why? What is it about these records that could be so dangerous as to be hidden from humanity? Throughout history, the Vatican has been the guardian of some of humanity's greatest mysteries. Reports indicate that documents were censored, books burned, and even scholars silenced to prevent certain truths from coming to light. Could it be that among these secrets is a forbidden prophecy that could change everything we know about the end times? Many believe there is something deeper behind the Vatican's silence when it comes to the apocalypse. The third prophecy of Fatima, the apocryphal Gospels, the hidden messages of ancient popes. All of this can be interconnected in a big puzzle that few dare to explore. There are documents that mention signs, catastrophes, and events that have not yet happened. But what if these texts are predicting something that has already begun? Just imagine. What if a secret Vatican document provided clues about the emergence of the Antichrist? What if the Church had known for centuries that something devastating was about to happen, but kept that knowledge restricted to just a select group of cardinals? If this were true, why hide it from the public? Why would only a privileged few have access to these revelations? The burning question is, what exactly is the Vatican trying to protect? Fear of a global panic? The collapse of religious structures? Or would this forbidden prophecy reveal something that challenges everything we know about faith, power, and the destiny of humanity? The truth may be more shocking than we imagine, and throughout this video, we will uncover Vatican secrets involving the apocalypse, analyzing hidden texts, mysterious prophecies, and forbidden documents that could completely change the way we see the future of civilization. And as we delve into these hidden mysteries, there is something very important we need to do together. If these prophecies truly carry warnings about the future of humanity, then now, more than ever, we need to unite our forces in prayer. Regardless of your faith or belief, the power of prayer has spanned centuries as a tool for protection, reflection, and spiritual connection. Therefore, I want to ask you something special. Leave your prayer request here in the comments. Write what is in your heart, whether for your family, for protection, for discernment, or for strength in the face of the uncertainties of the future. Let's form a powerful chain where everyone who watches this video can connect spiritually and cry out for wisdom in the face of these mysteries that surround us. If you believe that knowledge liberates, that the truth needs to be revealed, and that faith can guide us in times of uncertainty, then don't leave without leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. This not only helps spread this content to more people, but also ensures that you continue to receive revelations about the secrets of the Vatican, the forbidden books, and the prophecies that have been hidden throughout history. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos, because what we're discovering here, it's just the tip of the iceberg. What does the Vatican really know about the apocalypse? Why were certain documents never revealed? What is happening behind the scenes in the Church that few know about? Share this video with someone who needs to know this. And remember, prayer has power, and together we can seek understanding to face any truth that comes to light. Every day, more and more people ask themselves, are we really approaching the end times? The growing interest in biblical prophecies, the fear of the apocalypse, and the countless theories about what is to come arouse deep concern. But what? Does the Church really know about the end of the world? Is there information that has been deliberately hidden? What if the darkest secrets about the apocalypse are locked inside the Vatican's secret library, protected at all costs? The truth is that there are ancient documents that talk about catastrophic events, mass destruction, and even the arrival of a supreme ruler who would deceive all of humanity. But why are these texts practically unknown to the public? Many believe that certain prophecies were suppressed, not just to avoid panic, but because they could completely change the way we understand faith, history, and even the very destiny of humanity. Over the centuries, the Vatican accumulated thousands of classified documents, records that were never accessible to the public. Among these files, there are reports of prophetic events, visions that supposedly describe signs of the end times, and even correspondence between popes and church leaders, warning of what was to come. The question is, if these prophecies are not true, why hide them? Why does the Church avoid speaking openly about certain parts of the book of Revelation? Many scholars claim that there are parts of the Bible that have been removed or interpreted selectively so that certain secrets remained hidden. Some of the apocryphal books, which were excluded from the scriptures, contained disturbing messages about the future of humanity, about the final battle between the forces of good and evil, and even about the true role of the Vatican in this scenario. There are those who say that within the Vatican's secret archives there are manuscripts that detail not just Revelation, but also instructions on how the Church should deal with this knowledge should it come to light. What if I told you that? Could some of these prophecies already be fulfilled? Wars, natural disasters, social collapses, pandemics. All of these have been mentioned in ancient texts as signs of the end of times. Did the Vatican already know this would happen? Do church leaders have access to information that could shed light on what is happening in the world right now? It is undeniable that the fear of the end of the world has been a constant throughout history. But what differentiates past generations from ours is that we now have access to much more knowledge and information that was previously hidden. With technology, documents can be digitized, information leaks, and independent researchers begin to connect the dots. And when these connections are made, we begin to realize that there is something much bigger going on behind the scenes. Why should the Church, which has so much accumulated knowledge, does it not speak clearly about certain passages in the book of Revelation? Some biblical prophecies mention signs that would be visible to everyone, changes in heaven, on earth, and even in human behavior. What if these predictions were being fulfilled before our eyes, but without us realizing it? What if there was a document inside the Vatican secret library that confirmed that the apocalypse has already begun? The truth is that many of these questions have never been answered directly by the Vatican. The Church's silence on certain issues is deafening. And if there's anything we've learned from history, it's that when there's too much silence, it's usually because there's something big being hidden. What could be so shocking that it cannot be revealed? What is behind the veil of mystery that surrounds the apocalyptic documents that the Church has never released? What few know is that there are apocryphal texts that speak in detail about the end times and that for some reason were removed from the Bible throughout history. But why? What was in these writings that the Church decided to hide? Did they contain information that could completely change our understanding of the apocalypse? Many believe so. These forbidden manuscripts contained disturbing descriptions of what was to come, prophecies that seemed so precise and direct that they could have been written today. But instead of sharing them with the world, these texts were classified as heretical and banned. And it's not just these forgotten documents that raise questions. There are also records of saints and priests who, throughout history, have had shocking visions of the future, hidden prophecies that speak of a time when humanity would face devastating events, spiritual crises, and a great global deception. Some of these accounts describe precise signs, such as endless wars, diseases that would spread rapidly, a moral collapse, and the emergence of a leader who would deceive millions with false promises of peace. Could these prophecies be clues about what is already happening in the world? If so, why doesn't the Church speak openly about them? What is it about these predictions that needs to be hidden? Many of these visions were recorded in documents that, according to researchers, are still locked inside the Vatican's secret library. One of these mysterious texts could contain something that completely contradicts the traditional view of Revelation as we know it today. Imagine if there was a document that stated that everything we believe about the end times is wrong. What if what we have been taught about the Great Tribulation, the Antichrist, and the Last Judgment is only part of the story? There is evidence that over the centuries the Church rewrote some interpretations, omitted passages, and adjusted the narrative so that only certain information was released to the public. But here's the big question. If this information were insignificant, why hide it? Why would prophetic documents need to be kept secret? Is there something so shocking about these revelations that the Vatican is afraid people will find out? The simple fact that there are records that contradict the official versions already raises many suspicions. There are theologians who argue that apocalyptic events have already begun, and that some of the predictions made in these occult texts are unfolding before our eyes. Earthquakes, floods, wars, political and moral chaos. All of this was already described in these documents centuries ago. And if that weren't enough, there are rumors that within the Vatican itself, there is a select group of cardinals who have access to information that the rest of the world is unaware of. Information that details not only the arrival of recent times, but also how the forces behind these events are manipulating the course of history. This type of theory is not new. Since ancient times, there have been those who believed that the Church possessed advanced knowledge about future events and used this knowledge to exercise control. But if this is true, what would be the purpose of this secrecy? Are they protecting humanity from an unbearable truth, or just preserving their own power in the face of something they cannot avoid? What makes everything even more intriguing is the Church's silence on these texts and prophecies. When asked about certain apocryphal documents or prophetic visions, the official answer is usually vague, evasive. But why not just set the record straight? If these predictions are not true, why not debunk them once and for all? Why are there so many layers of mystery when we talk about the end times and what is really awaiting us? Something doesn't make sense, and the more we look for answers, the more questions arise. But what about you? What do you think of all this? Do you believe that the Vatican hides documents that contradict the traditional view of the apocalypse? Do you think these apocryphal texts should be revealed to the world? Comment below. The truth needs to be revealed, if you think the time has come for these secrets to come to light. If there is something that causes concern and awakens the curiosity of people around the world, it is the idea that the Vatican holds secrets that could completely change our understanding of the future of humanity. Secret archives, sealed documents, hidden manuscripts that, according to many scholars, contain disturbing prophecies and detailed visions about the end times. But what exactly is in these documents? What does the Church really know, and more importantly, why has this information never been fully revealed to the public? One of the greatest mysteries within the Vatican's secret archives is, without a doubt, the third secret of Fatima. For those who don't know, this prophecy was revealed to 3 children in Portugal in 1917, when, according to reports, the Virgin Mary would have appeared and transmitted prophetic messages about the future of humanity. The first 2 secrets predicted historical events that actually happened, such as World War II and the rise of communism. But it was the third secret that generated the most fear and speculation, because for many years the Church refused to publish it, claiming that its contents were too scary to share with the world. When it was finally revealed, the Vatican presented a version that talked about persecution of the Church and the suffering of Christians. But many scholars believe that this is not the full version. There are indications that part of the third secret still remains hidden, and that its content may be directly related to the apocalypse and the final destiny of humanity. There are reports that popes, cardinals, and theologians who had access to the true secret were deeply shaken and warned of a great punishment that would come upon the world. But why was this information never released in full? Is the Church hiding something that, if revealed, could shake the faith of millions of people? Many believe that, within the Vatican's secret archives, they exist other documents that would confirm prophecies about the end times, in addition to the third secret of Fatima. Manuscripts containing visions of saints, revelations from church leaders, and even texts that would have been written by past popes, warning about events that are yet to come. These are records that talk about devastating wars, natural catastrophes, drastic changes in society, and the arrival of a world leader who would deceive millions of people before the final collapse. But if these prophecies exist, why haven't they been shared with humanity? Reports indicate that several theologians and historians have attempted to access these documents over the years, but have been blocked. Some claim that the Vatican maintains tight control over who can and cannot access these archives, and that only a select group of cardinals and scholars are allowed to see these records. There are cases of researchers who claim to have come very close to discovering something important, but who, mysteriously, were removed, discredited, or simply disappeared from the academic scene. What did these people find? What kind of information is so dangerous that it needs to be kept from public knowledge? The very existence of the Vatican Secret Library already raises numerous questions. We know there is more than 85 kilometers of shelves full of old documents, books that were withdrawn from circulation, and texts that were never published. Among these records, there are documents dating back to the Middle Ages, the time of the first popes, and even manuscripts that supposedly detail past and future events. If there is nothing to hide, why isn't this library open to the public? Why do only a few people have access to these secrets? It is impossible not to question what the Vatican's true intentions are in maintaining such secrecy regarding these texts. If the Church really has information about the end times, about the Antichrist, about apocalyptic prophecies, and about events that could change the course of history, why not share this with humanity? Was it to avoid panic? Or is there something even deeper and darker behind this mystery? Throughout history, countless prophecies have warned of major natural disasters, catastrophic wars, and the rise of a world leader that would deceive millions before the end of time. But what few know is that many of these warnings may be hidden in the Vatican's secret archives, protected by absolute silence. If these prophecies were not important, why would they be under lock and key? What do these documents reveal that could shake the world? It is no coincidence that ancient prophecies mention devastating earthquakes, tsunamis of unimaginable proportions, global pandemics, and a growing moral and spiritual crisis as signs that something big is about to happen. The book of Revelation itself speaks of a time when the earth would go through a period of purification, where catastrophic natural events would intensify as a harbinger of what is to come. Which leads us to an inevitable question. Did the Vatican already know these events were going to happen? Did ancient documents predict exactly what we are experiencing now? And it doesn't stop there. Many of these prophecies talk about the arrival of a global leader, someone who would emerge from the chaos promising peace and security, but who, in fact, had hidden intentions. This leader would be widely accepted by the nations, unify peoples and beliefs, gain the trust of the masses, and when at the height of power, reveal his true nature. The Antichrist, a being that would pretend to be a savior, but would bring with it the ruin of humanity. Apocryphal accounts, texts that were taken from the Bible, and documents that supposedly never became public mention this ruler in much more detail than what is preached today. But the Church says little about this. Why? Does the Vatican know who this leader is? Is there already evidence of its presence in the world? The Vatican's silence on this topic is, to say the least, intriguing. The Church avoids talking about certain prophecies, discredits visions of saints, and ignores revelations that do not fit into the official discourse. Some predictions were quickly dismissed as misinterpretations, while others, even with shocking reports, were simply swept under the rug. But what would be the reason? Is the Vatican protecting humanity from a terrible truth, or simply hiding something that should not be discovered? There are cases of seers and saints who had detailed revelations about the end of times and the arrival of the Antichrist. Many described his appearance, his method of manipulation, and even the events that would precede his ascension. But what happened to these prophecies? They were discredited, ignored, or suppressed. Why? Some of these predictions were so accurate and frightening that they could have had an immense impact if they were widely publicized. The Church, with its power of influence, decided to filter what should or should not be public knowledge. But if there are true prophecies about the Antichrist and the end times, why not prepare people? Why not talk openly about it? Many believe that the Vatican already knows more than it reveals. Theologians, historians, and even former members of the Church claim that within there are documents in the Vatican's secret library that describe in detail the Antichrist and his arrival, as well as events that would trigger humanity's last great spiritual battle. But if that's true, why doesn't the Church speak out? The most impressive thing is that some prophecies that were discredited in the past ended up coming true. Many historical events were predicted in texts considered unofficial, and yet they happened exactly as described. If so many predictions were correct, why continue to ignore those that remain? What makes certain prophecies unacceptable to the Church? Could the answer lie in the secrets the Vatican refuses to divulge? Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the Vatican knows more about the Antichrist and the end times than it actually reveals? Comment below. The truth needs to be exposed. if you think these secrets should be revealed. Over the centuries, the Vatican has accumulated a huge collection of documents, manuscripts, and historical records, many of which have never been revealed to the public. But the question that few ask is, has the Church officially admitted to having confidential documents about prophecies? The answer may be more complex than it seems. Although the Vatican rarely comments directly on confidential files, there are clear indications that within the halls of the Holy See, there are highly restricted records that speak not only about the past, but also about the future of humanity. The very concept of a Vatican secret library, where priceless documents are kept away from the public eye, already suggests that there is much more knowledge locked away there than we realize. In the few moments when the Church has spoken out on these topics, the discourse has always been carefully controlled. Why so much mystery? If there is nothing to hide, why not release these files? Why not allow independent scholars to analyze these documents? The official justification always revolves around the preservation of faith and social stability. There is a real fear that certain revelations could destabilize humanity, generate panic and deep questions about everything we have been taught. But to what extent is this concern legitimate? Is the Church really protecting humanity from frightening truths, or just ensuring that certain information never comes to light? This fear of causing panic is not something new. History is full of moments when the Church needed to control narratives to avoid uncontrolled reactions from the population. But what happens when this control goes beyond the limit of protection and turns into censorship? The Vatican knows the impact that a shocking revelation can have, especially when we talk about apocalyptic prophecies. Fear of a mass reaction may explain why certain documents remain stored under extreme security, with access allowed only to a select group of cardinals and scholars. But is hiding information in this way really the right way? The most intriguing thing is that, on several occasions, reports have emerged from theologians, bishops, and even former members of the Vatican who claim that the official interpretation of the apocalypse is not the same as that which is publicly preached. This means that the Church may have a completely different view of the final events, but choose to present a simplified version to the faithful. This theory is based on excerpts from the Bible itself that suggest a more symbolic and codified reading of the apocalypse, something that can be understood only by those who have access to the original texts and their hidden meanings. If the Vatican interprets Revelation differently than it teaches the public, an even more troubling question arises. What do they know that we don't? What was discovered in the ancient manuscripts that could change our perception of the final events? Some theories suggest that the Church understands the apocalypse not as a single catastrophic event, but as an ongoing process that unfolds over time. This would mean that some of the signs described in the Bible would already be happening, but in a way that most people don't notice. This would explain why so many events in the world today seem to fit biblical prophecies without there being a clear statement from the Church on the subject. Another point that cannot be ignored is the existence of documents not only about the apocalypse, but also about key figures from that period, such as the Antichrist and the Great Tribulation. There are rumors that within the Vatican archives, there are texts that speak of an individual who was already operating behind the scenes, preparing his ascension. But once again, this information has never been officially confirmed or denied, which only increases the speculation and mystery surrounding this topic. What would happen if the Vatican released these documents? Would the population panic? Or does the Church fear that this would reveal an inconvenient truth about its own participation in these events? If there is something that generates even more suspicion about the hidden secrets of the Vatican, there are numerous reports of historians, priests, and researchers who tried to surface sensitive information and were silenced in mysterious ways. Throughout history, many scholars have dedicated their lives to investigating ancient manuscripts, forgotten prophecies, and apocryphal documents that could reveal a new perspective on the apocalypse and the fate of humanity. But what happened to those who got too close to the truth? What did they discover that caused them to disappear from the spotlight or be abruptly discredited? There are records of priests who, upon accessing restricted documents within the Vatican's secret library, suddenly abandoned their positions in the Church. Some, without any explanation, withdrew from public life. while others, previously so active in defending the faith, began to avoid talking about certain topics, as if they had been warned or prevented from continuing their research. There are reports of religious people who confided in close friends that they had discovered something disturbing in the church archives. But before they could disclose this information, they simply disappeared from the public scene. And these cases are not isolated. One of the most enigmatic episodes involves priests who worked directly with ancient manuscripts and who reported finding documents that mentioned apocalyptic events in much more detail than the traditional Bible. Some believe that these texts spoke clearly about the identity of the Antichrist, the true role of the Vatican in the last days, and secrets dating back to the time of Jesus Christ. However, whenever these revelations began to gain strength, those involved were removed, discredited, or had their research refuted by ecclesiastical authorities. But it is not just religious people who have faced difficulties when touching on this topic. Independent historians and researchers who have sought access to restricted Vatican documents have also encountered major obstacles and, in some cases, been persecuted in ways that raise many eyebrows. Some had their academic credentials revoked, lost access to research institutions, and were even threatened to abandon their investigations. But the question that remains unanswered is, what exactly were they trying to find out? Many of these pursuits seem to have a pattern. Whenever someone approaches documents that may reveal previously unpublished information about biblical prophecies, apocryphal texts, or historical secrets of the church, your life changes drastically. Some suffer public defamation, others are pressured to abandon their jobs, and there are even reports of people who simply disappeared without leaving a trace. Were these people about to expose something the Vatican didn't want to come to light? And what about the documents themselves that throughout history seem to have mysteriously disappeared? There are records of extremely old manuscripts that have disappeared from the Vatican archives without any official explanation. Texts that, according to theologians, contained information about the true meaning of the apocalypse and about future events that had already been predicted centuries ago. If these documents weren't important, why did they just disappear? Who was interested in erasing them from history? What makes it all even more puzzling is that the Vatican has a rigorous security system for the preservation of its archives. Books, letters, and manuscripts are catalogued and kept under extreme secrecy, which means that any document disappearance could not occur accidentally. This leads us to question whether there is a force within the Vatican itself working to hide information from the public. And it's not difficult to imagine that some of these revelations could drastically change our perception of humanity's past, present, and future. If there are documents that describe forgotten prophecies, or that contradict the Church's official version of the apocalypse, the existence of the Antichrist, and the final battle between good and evil, then it is understandable that certain people have a great interest in keeping this hidden. What we cannot ignore is that the more they try to hide, the greater the suspicion becomes that something is really being covered up. And now, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe the Vatican has silenced scholars who have come too close to the truth? Comment below. The truth cannot be hidden. If you think these secrets need to be revealed, if these prophecies are true, it would change absolutely everything in our lives. The way we see history, faith, the future of humanity, and even power structures could be completely transformed. Think about it. If the Vatican really does have secret documents that confirm apocalyptic events, the arrival of a deceptive global leader, and drastic changes that have already begun to happen, what would that mean for us? This would mean that many of the things we believe, that we have been taught for generations, could be just fragments of a much larger truth, carefully controlled and hidden. The big question is, does the Church have a moral duty to disclose this information? If there is knowledge kept in the Vatican archives that can prepare people for what is to come, wouldn't it be a mistake to keep it secret? The Church has always been one of the greatest influences in the formation of Western society and culture. It has shaped the way we understand spirituality, morality, and even historical events. But if there's something humanity needs to know, shouldn't it be our right to have access to that information? If there are detailed prophecies about the last days, about the forces that would act behind the scenes, and about the true role of the Church in this scenario, Why is all of this kept secret? It is not difficult to imagine the impact these revelations could have on people's faith. For many, discovering that essential information about the future has been hidden for centuries could generate such a shock that it would lead to a complete loss of trust in religious institutions. How many people have based their lives, their choices, and their beliefs on what they were taught, without knowing that there was more, much more, being kept secret? If some of these prophecies talk about the arrival of a time of great deception, where millions of people would blindly follow a path without knowing what was really happening, does this mean that we are already living in that moment? What if the hidden truth is even more disturbing? There are reports that within the Vatican's secret archives, there are documents that accurately describe dates, events, and even locations where the most impactful changes will happen. If these records really exist, what is the Church waiting to release? Is there a plan to reveal this information only when it is too late? Or do some of these prophecies confirm something that the Church itself is afraid to admit? The most worrying thing is that many of the signs that were described in ancient texts are already happening before our eyes. The growing global instability, the natural disasters that intensify every year, the collapse of traditional values and the rise of charismatic leaders who promise to solve all of humanity's problems, all of this has been prophesied for centuries. What if the Church already knew that this scenario was inevitable? If there were documents confirming that are the events we are witnessing not mere coincidence, but part of a cycle predicted long ago? If these prophecies are true, the impact on people's faith could vary drastically. Some may feel that they have been deceived for centuries, that they have trusted an institution that chose silence over the truth. Others may see this as a sign that it is time to prepare spiritually for what is to come. But there are also those who, even in the face of evidence, would choose not to believe, because accepting this reality would mean changing everything they have always believed. And that may be the reason why the Church prefers to keep certain information hidden, because the truth can be devastating to those who are not prepared for it. In recent years, the Vatican has avoided making direct statements about the end times, maintaining a cautious and often vague speech when it comes to the apocalypse and prophecies related to the destiny of humanity. However, there are signs that something is going on behind the scenes, and the Church's silence only increases suspicions. While some Catholic leaders talk about trying times and challenges to the faith, there are rumors that within the Vatican's innermost circles, extremely sensitive information is being discussed away from the public eye. And what about the recent leaks? Over the years, several documents that were supposed to remain secret ended up becoming known to independent researchers. Leaked reports indicate that the Vatican may have detailed information about future events and about drastic changes that will occur in the world in the coming years. There are records that mention secret meetings between church leaders and scientists, which raises the question, is there something so serious happening that requires an alignment between religion and science? In recent years, some statements by Pope Francis himself and other church leaders have drawn attention. In certain speeches, there are mentions about the world going through a moment of transition, about difficult times that will require faith and spiritual preparation. But why is the Church talking about this now? What exactly do they know that hasn't already been shared? While some statements can be interpreted as symbolic warnings, there are those who believe that the Vatican is quietly trying to prepare people for something bigger to come. And it's not just the prophecies that raise suspicions. Science itself is starting to point to worrying signs, and the connection between extreme natural events and ancient sacred texts is increasingly evident. In recent years, we have seen a significant increase in the number of natural disasters, pandemics, environmental crises, and social instability, all elements mentioned in various prophetic texts as signs of the end times. But are these events just natural consequences? Or is there something bigger happening behind the scenes? Most intriguingly, some scientists and scholars who have no direct connection to the Church have begun to suggest that there is a pattern in global events that fits with predictions made centuries ago. Studies indicate that climate collapse, the advancement of artificial intelligence, political instability, and the risk of major conflicts could be taking humanity to a point of no return. But were these events already predicted in old documents that the Vatican keeps in storage? Furthermore, There are theories that claim that the Vatican has records that confirm the existence of forbidden knowledge about the origin and destiny of humanity. Some believe that there are texts that describe not only the end times as something religious, but also as a cyclical event, which has happened before and may repeat itself. This raises an important question. Does the Church know more than it is willing to admit? Could it be that the events we are witnessing were already discussed within the Vatican a long time ago? If we consider the historical accounts, we will realize that whenever a major transformation was about to happen, the Church strategically positioned itself to control the narrative. This happened in the Middle Ages, with the burning of books considered dangerous. It happened during the period of the Inquisition, when certain knowledge was prohibited, and it still happens today, when documents are kept under absolute secrecy within the Vatican's secret library. If there's something truly alarming going on behind the scenes, it's possible that this information will never be released to the common public, at least not until it's too late. Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you think the Vatican already knows something big is about to happen? Comment below. The truth needs to be revealed. If you believe these secrets should come to light, if there is something that raises more and more questions and theories, it is the idea that the Vatican hides secrets that could completely change the way we see the apocalypse. Over the centuries, documents were sealed, prophecies were hidden, and ancient texts were removed from circulation. But why? What is in these records that needs to be kept from public knowledge? If the Church truly believes that the apocalypse is a symbolic event, as many claim, then there should be no reason to hide information. But if there is something deeper, something that has been predicted in detail and that points to events that have already begun to happen, then the Vatican's silence becomes even more suspicious. Many experts and scholars believe that the Vatican's secret library contains not only historical manuscripts, but also records of events that have not yet happened. Leaked reports indicate that certain documents speak of a period of great tribulation where humanity will face unprecedented challenges. If these prophecies have already been analyzed by theologians and kept confidential, then the big question is, does the Vatican already know that we are experiencing the first signs of the apocalypse? It is impossible to ignore that there is a lot of movement happening behind the scenes. Recently, some statements from the Pope himself and religious leaders indicate that we are living in trying times. But what exactly does this mean? Is it just a generic message of faith? Or a veiled warning about something much bigger? What does the Vatican know about the future of humanity that we don't already know? The most impressive thing is that, when analyzing ancient texts and comparing them with current events, we notice repeating patterns. Environmental catastrophes, wars that seem to have no end, financial crises that destabilize the world, and an increase in persecution against those who follow a more traditional faith. All of these events were described in religious texts as signs of the end times. But if the Church truly believes that these are just cyclical events in history, why are there secret documents that cannot be accessed by the public? The Vatican has a history of keeping secrets extremely closely guarded. If we look at the past, we will realize that information has already been hidden several times. This happened with the apocryphal Gospels, which presented a different view of the story of Jesus and were suppressed. It also happened with the prophecy of the third secret of Fatima, which, according to many theories, was not completely revealed to the public. And now, there are indications that there are documents within the Vatican that describe the apocalypse in a completely different way than we know. What if what is hidden in these texts is something so shocking that it could lead people to question the entire religious structure? What if the Church always knew certain events would happen, but chose to keep that information restricted to avoid panic or to protect its own influence? If secret Vatican documents truly point to a future where humanity faces chaos before the arrival of a global ruler, why weren't we warned sooner? Many believe that the Church may be preparing for a major event, one that would completely change the course of history. Reports indicate that there are secret meetings taking place inside the Vatican, where only a select group of religious leaders have access to privileged information. But what exactly is being discussed in these meetings? What is about to happen that requires such a high level of secrecy? If we look at the world stage, we will see that there is something strange in the air. There is an air of uncertainty, as if we are on the verge of a great revelation. What if the Vatican already knows that we are close to an unprecedented global change? If there are documents that confirm that the prophecies of Revelation are not just symbolic, but rather detailed descriptions of events that are already happening, it would mean that the prophetic clock is ticking, and we are much closer than we realize. I know. What did you feel the voice of God speaking to you through this video? Don't ignore this call. Something brought you here, and it wasn't by chance. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and continue this journey of discovery with me. There is much more to be revealed, and you can't miss out. I know that if you reach the end of this video, I want you to comment below, "I am awake to the truth." This will show that you are part of those who want to seek knowledge and no longer accept living in the dark. Leave your like right now, so that this content reaches more people and so that this message continues to spread. What was said here today could open the eyes of many, and you can be part of it. And now, to continue this investigation, watch the next video that is appearing on the screen. You can't imagine what we're going to reveal. Click now and continue discovering the secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know.